Hey y'all, and welcome to a very special episode of Eatin Good in the Woods Travel to Scotland. Mrs. Eatin Good in the Woods and I recently returned from a wonderful trip to Scotland and took this footage of a drive through Glencoe, a beautiful place that holds a very dark and sinister history. So y'all follow me, I'll show you around. Before we go any further, I'd like to remind you guys, please don't forget to mash that subscribe button, give me a big old thumbs up, maybe even leave me a comment or two. I sure would appreciate it. This is Glencoe, arguably the most beautiful and scenic drive in all of Scotland. It's hard to believe that within its magnificent peaks and breathtaking waterfalls lie a dark, sinister past. This is the story of the massacre of Glencoe. The massacre of Glencoe took place in Glencoe, the gateway to the Highlands of Scotland, on the 13th of February, 1692. An estimated 30 members and associates of Clan MacDonald of Glencoe were killed by Scottish government forces, allegedly for failing to pledge allegiance to the new monarchs William III and Mary II. While the Jacobite Rising of 1689 was no longer a serious threat by May of 1690, unrest continued in the remote Highlands, which consumed resources needed for the 9 Years' War in Flanders. In late 1690, the Scottish government agreed to pay the Jacobite clan chiefs a total of £12,000 in return for swearing an oath of loyalty to William and Mary. However, disagreements over how to divide the money meant by December of 1691, none of them had taken the oath. Under pressure from William, Secretary of State Lord Stair decided to make an example as a warning of the consequences for further delay. The Glencoe MacDonalds were not the only ones who failed to meet the deadline, as the Keppoch MacDonalds did not swear until early February. No one knows why they were chosen, but it seems to have been a combination of internal clan politics and a reputation for lawlessness that made them an easy target. There are similar events in Scottish history, but the brutality of the massacre shocked contemporaries, and it still does to this day. It became a significant element in the persistence of Jacobitism in the Highlands during the first half of the 18th century. The treacherous slaughter of members of the MacDonald clan of Glencoe were carried out by soldiers under Archibald Campbell, the 10th Earl of Argyll. Many Scottish clans had remained loyal to King James II after he was replaced on the English and Scottish thrones by William III in 1689. In August of 1691, the government offered an indemnity to all chiefs who should take up an oath of allegiance before January 1 of 1692. Letters of fire and sword authorizing savage attacks upon recalcitrants that were drawn up in anticipation of widespread refusal. The chiefs, however, took the oath. Alexander MacDonald of Glencoe postponed his submission until December 31st, 1691, and was then unable to take his own oath until January 6 because there was no magistrate at Fort William to receive it. Sir John Dalrymple, William's Secretary of State for Scotland, thereupon issued an order under the King's signature for military punishment of the MacDonalds. More than 100 of Argyll's soldiers, who had been quartered amicably upon the MacDonalds for more than a week, suddenly attacked them. Many of the clan escaped, but the chief and 33 other men, 2 women, and 2 children were killed. John Campbell, Earl of Breadalbane and Holland, a neighbor and an enemy of the MacDonalds, was widely suspected of planning the attack, but was not its main instigator. His imprisonment in 1695 was for earlier involvement with the Jacobites. 2 military corps of 120 Campbells, hereditary enemies of the MacDonalds, were stationed in Glencoe by the end of 1692. They carried orders for free quarter an established alternative to paying taxes in a society that still did not use much cash. Here, there seemed to be little problem. The visitors were received with Highland hospitality, graciously given by the clansmen, cordially collected by the soldiers. And their commander was Robert Campbell of Glenlyon, a hapless laird who was also son-in-law to MacDonalds of Glencoe. In the Highlands, ties of kinship were always the strongest. Hereditary enemies of the MacDonalds the Campbells might be, but up to this point the people of the Glen felt safe. Then on February 12th, orders arrived from Fort William for detachments of the troops to take up position on the two main paths into and out of Glencoe. Glenlyon later received the commands in written form. Later still, messages came once again with instructions from another officer, evidently uneasy that even Highland soldiers might blanch at the directives they were expected to follow. He wrote, "See that this put in execution without feud or favor, else you may expect to be dealt with as one not true to the king or government, nor a man fit to carry commission in the king's service." Once the massacre started in the middle of that night, it was indeed unlikely to be something a clansman might be proud of. For example, MacDonald of Glencoe was killed getting out of his bed to greet soldiers he supposed were just passing by. They shot him on sight. His wife was beaten and robbed, but his two sons ran and saved themselves. Outside in the Glen, most able-bodied men managed to flee, leaving their crofts to be set on fire behind them. Death was then dealt out to the widows and the children left shivering in the snow. If they did still escape, they might perish from cold as they sought over the hills to find refuge with neutral neighbors. It all added up to criminal action, which has been planned in secret, if also to official action which could not be kept secret. For the sake of law and order, the government had to decide. It set up a commission of inquiry on the premise this was a case of slaughter under trust, an offense in Scotland since 1587, ironically as a curb to feuding. It had introduced the Scots law to the term cold blood, which defines the worst class of murder, such as after hospitality had been accepted or surrender had been agreed. It might have been formulated with Glencoe in mind. The only trouble was that soon everybody in Scotland knew the truth about Glencoe, that the king signed the orders and the Lord Advocate took charge of the dirty work. The commission therefore focused on whether the men in the Glen had exceeded orders or whether the orders were legal. A very popular story says not all of the regiment were on board with the slaughter. After days of kindness and hospitality from the MacDonalds, some soldiers warned their host families to leave after sundown, saving many. The massacre inspired Sir Walter Scott to write the following poem, On the Massacre of Glencoe. "O tell me, harper, wherefore flow thy wayward notes of wail and woe, far down the desert of Glencoe, where none may list their melody. Say, harpst thou to the mits that fly, or to the dun deer glancing by, or to the eagle that from high screams chorus to thy minstrelsy? No, not to these, for they have rest, the midst wreath of the mountain crest, the stag his lair, the ern her nest, abode of lone security. But those for whom I pour the lay, not wildwood deep nor mountain gray, not this deep dell that shroud from day could screen from treacherous cruelty. Their flag was furled and mute their drum, the very household dogs were dumb, unwont to bay at guests that come in guise of hospitality. His blithest note the piper plied, her gayest snod the maiden tied, the dame her distaff flung aside to tend her kindly housewifery. At the hand that mingled in the meal, at midnight drew the felon steel, and gave the host kind breast to feel, meed for his hospitality. The friendly hearth which warmed that hand, at midnight armed it with the brand. The bayed destruction's flame expand, their red and fearful blazonry. Then woman's shriek was heard in vain, nor infancy pitied plain. More than warrior's groan could gain, respite from the ruthless butchery. The winter wind that whistled shrill, the snow that night that cloaked the hill, though wild and pitiless, had still far more than southern clemency. Long have my harp's best notes been gone, few are its strings and faint their tone. They can but sound in desert lone their gray-haired master misery. Where each gray hair a minstrel string, each chord should imprecations fling, till startled Scotland loud should ring, revenge for blood and treachery. So that's the story of the massacre at Glencoe. Here it is nearly 400 years later, and you figure we had learned our lesson. Sadly, we haven't. But you know, not all Scottish history is doom and gloom. I urge you to look up the story of Greyfriars Bobby, or how St. Mungo became a saint, or even some spooky stories like the ghostly piper of Duntroon Castle. Well, I'm going to let this video continue to play while you guys take in the beauty that is Glencoe. Well, that's going to about do it for this very, very special episode of Eatin Good in the Woods. I certainly hope you've enjoyed this beautiful ride through Glencoe and the riveting story that accompanied it. So listen, y'all going out there and be nice to one another. I sure love y'all. And until next time, God bless you. Bye-bye.